Welcome back for this week's layout tutorial. My hope and intention is to provide inspiration you can use to preserve your memories for your future generations. I'm Anita with beandesigns.com. This is week 29 of 52 DigiScrap layouts in 52 weeks using GIMP, which is an open source free Photoshop alternative for your graphic designing, creating digital scrapbook layouts. This layout uses the text to path action around the outside of this letter S to create some creative journaling and titling for the layout. I am using the most recent version of GIMP at the time of this recording, which is 2.10.20. I used the Take a Selfie kit for this layout, which was available from gingerscraps.net. I will put a link in the description box to their shop, as well as information regarding the fonts that I've used in the layout. Let's explore the layout that I have. Here is the current layout in the XCF with all of the layers. I've just hidden most of them, and we'll just walk through and explore the steps that I took to create the layout. So initially I started with finding in my text options that I have installed a font that was very rounded that I could put some text around. I found BubbleGum font in my available ones, and I put a size of 4,000 pixels and made it black, and I typed in the letter here on my image. I use the alignment tool to put it in the center horizontally on my layout. I manually put it centered the text, the S, manually centered it vertically. Once I have my text layer created with my S, we're going to go ahead and create a path along the outside of this S. So with our text layer active, I'm just going to hover over it, right click, and choose text to path. So we're using the text to create a path. I click on that, and a path will be created around the outside of our S. We can see this path by going to our Paths tab across the top, and you see that the active layer right here is the one we created. You see these other ones because this is an image that I've hidden some things on. But here it says S number 1. This is our active layer. It's our active created path. So while we have that active, we can tell that this layer is active because it is darker than the other layers. We'll go back to our Layers tab. On our Layers tab, you would create a new text layer of the text that you want to go around the outer edge of your S. So my text layer, it says State Fair of Texas, State Fair of Texas, State Fair of Texas, State Fair of Texas. My experience shows me that I need to have my text layer, which I'm putting around the outside of my letter, needs to be all on one line. In order to do that, I simply zoomed out and typed out my text layer so that it is on one line. I used the Candara font at 150 pixels to create my text layer. I did some trial and error, so my text layer is actually going to fit perfectly around my S. It may not happen for you. You may have to redo several steps in order to get it to fit exactly how you want it to work. While I have my text layer, my journaling text layer active, I'm going to right click over it, and I'm going to choose text along path. So we created a path. Now we're going to text along that path. When I click on that, GIMP will create a path around our previously created path, putting that text around. So we'll go ahead and hide that layer, and we'll go over to our Paths tab, and we can hide the outline path, so that we can see that this path has been created of all of our text. And like I mentioned before, mine fits all the way around it perfectly. You may have to do some trial and error to get yours to fit around. I have a path, and I need to make that into a selection so that we can paint inside of it. So along the bottom of our Paths tab, we're going to find Path to Selection. It is colored in, not grayed out, so we know it's an option for us. I'm going to click on that, and a selection will be created around the outside of the path that we created. You can tell this by the marching ants around those letters. So I went ahead and hid that layer, but we still see the marching ants of the selection. I'm going to make sure that this is active. We're going to go back to our layers tab, create a new layer, and this is going to be our painted text. So we're going to call it a painted text layer. So that layer is active. And I'm just going to go to my edit menu and I'm going to choose fill with foreground color. However, that is a white color and that's not what I want. So let's go over to our color options, return to the default colors. Now my color is black. My foreground color is now black. Right click, edit, fill with foreground color. So everything inside this selection was filled on our new layer with black. I'm going to select none. Now we can see all of our text, all of our journaling around our S on the path that was created. Now we want to create this window cutout effect. But right now, this S, the path was created right outside our S, and we are missing some of our text. So let's shrink this S. So let's make that the active layer. While we're still hovering over the active layer, we're going to right click and do alpha to selection. Over on our image, I'm going to right click. I'm going to choose select. And I'm going to shrink that selection by 50 pixels to shrink in the selections so that now it gives some space for us to be able to see all of our text. So let's delete that outer part of our selection. We can do that by returning to our image, right-clicking, select, and invert our selection. So you now have marching ants around here and around the outer edge. So with that layer active, we're going to push the delete key on our keyboard. And we now have shrunk the S to where we can see all of our journaling around. We're going to use this S now to cut a window from our main paper. We would have started with a full main paper page. I'm going to right click over this S, do alpha to selection. So we now have this selected, right? And I want to cut that from the full page. And what is resultant of that is this. We have a clear, transparent area underneath our background paper, our main digital page. Please note that in my preferences of my specific instance of GIMP, I have told GIMP to open all of my images with an alpha channel. That allows my images to create a transparent background. If you do not have that set up, you would need to add an alpha channel to your full digital paper before cutting it if you want it to be transparent. We have our hole cut out of our digital paper. Underneath that hole, if you look at our finished page, we have our main paper. We have a hole. Underneath the main paper, we have these photos. We have a shadow, and we have some edging, a multiplied edging around the outside of the cutout to just give it all that dimension. So let's walk through the steps. We're going to fill a layer with black, cut the S out of it, apply a blur to it to give us this shadow, and we're going to add an edging to the edge of our background paper. So let's go back to our layout here. So with this S, we have the transparent part selected. So let's go ahead and invert that selection. Invert. So now you see the marching ants around the outer edge and the S. So that means that this area is selected. So let's create a new layer. This is going to be the shadow layer. And let's put it underneath our paper layer. And we're going to use the fill tool. So I'm going to click on that fill tool. Black is our foreground color, and we're going to fill the selected area. We want to add a blur to this black. So let's select none. Go to filters along the top menu bar and choose blur and Gaussian blur. I want my Gaussian blur to be approximately 20 on my size X and Y. You can see the blurring that has occurred. Push OK. And now let's go ahead and make that top layer visible. And we can see the blur peeking around the edge of our transparent cutout. I'm going to use the move tool and I'm going to grab that blur. I'm going to pull down into the right to give that dimension over on the edge, to give that depth to our cutout. Our next step is to create that multiplied edge. So let's go ahead and return to the background paper layer. I'm going to duplicate that layer, use my select tool, and click inside the cutout area to select the S. Once I have that selection indicated by the marching ants, I'm going to right click on my image area, choose select, and I'm going to choose the feather option at 25 pixels, and I'm going to grow this selection by 15. I've now selected the transparent area and grown my selection. I'm going to invert my selection so that I can cut away this area of the layer. To what's remaining, I'm going to add a multiply mode to my layer and select none, and there we have our multiplied edge on the paper layer and our shadow. The next step that I did was bring in my photos. So I brought in several photos that I wanted to be inside my window cutout. I played with them, I arranged them, and determined exactly where I wanted them to be. Used the scale tool to scale them to size. Using my path tool and my tool options, I was able to design lines that were straight and curved to go in between my photos. And then I used the stroke path option to stroke along my path. Next, I came in and duplicated the background paper layer, and I added the dimension around the outer edge. I brought in the elements. I added the star and the sticker, the word sticker. I used a piece of tape to hold that down. I brought in and resized my bubble, my text bubble. I typed in some text, finished it all out. When I added my word and my star, I in the air the text below was showing through, so I just went and used my eraser tool to make space for that. The Bean Designs YouTube channel has both additional layout videos, tutorials, as well as GIMP tutorials on using GIMP and creating your digital scrapbook layouts. My hope is that you and your family are blessed and you're enjoying these videos as much as I enjoy making them. Bye bye until next week.